reading, writing and arithmetic, and above all of it, bits of Latin and Greek. Like what you did was you set up a hut literally up against a fence, up against a hedge. My mother was a mighty woman altogether. Like in her yard, she was mighty. But when I'd meet her in the square in the store, like she wasn't half the woman. Somehow she got she hadn't the scope of her own yard, of her own farmyard, and she was a kind of mighty woman. And my father was much more reflective. I mean, over in the stall in the night, like because he came from Diggle, esmeen of us a machn of them féin, thinking and meditating to myself, like. He was loved when he'd go over, like, to feed the cows the last thing at night, you know, to give them the last hay, not silage now, hay. And he'd go over and he'd feed all the cows and he'd sit there in the back and he'd be thinking away to himself, smoking the last pipe. And that's what he'd be doing. He loved to listen to the cows chewing the cud and to hear them eating the hay, and that kind of calmed him and brought him into a very deep place within himself. And there was one night, like I remember, he came in with his lantern and he quenched the lantern, and as he was hanging up the lantern, you know, he said to me, "I've come to din the thinking, John, and I still haven't found the answer." When my mother died, she died unexpectedly of a heart attack, like, and he came home and from the funeral, like, and he was asking me, you know, why did it happen? Why was it her and not me? And I said, maybe there's a providence in it, because maybe you can pray in ways that maybe she wouldn't pray, like. And there was one night above in the room, like, and one night I got curious, what's he saying? Like, what prayer is he praying? Because I don't know if my father would know the Our Father to the Hail Mary. Maybe he would and maybe he wouldn't, you know, but I never had him praying them anyway, you know. But I went up and I stood in the kitchen anyway, and there he was. I heard his prayer, "May Jesus that died on the cross have no hard feelings against you, Mary. May Jesus that died on the cross have no hard feelings against you, Mary. May Jesus that died on the cross have no hard feelings against you, Mary." And you'd listen to that all night. And I swear to God, like, you know, you'd feel the house was floated out into eternity by him. We weren't in time anymore, we were in eternity.
From the simplicity of his father's prayer to the struggles of the great mystics, John believes he's found a way towards wholeness. He feels strongly that this journey cannot ignore Ireland's great monastic tradition.
Sure, Inishfallen, Lord, just the name Inishfallen, like, God bless us, it's almost like it has the romance of the children of Lear about it, you know. I mean, a place of retirement, a place where, you know, Loch Lane, it might be, means the Lake of the Scholars, like, and they had the great Inishfallen annals here, the annals of Inishfallen here. It is just that sense of the children of Lear. It's as full of magic as that, you know. There is the great Romanesque doorway. So the Christian retreat from the world, the Christian retirement from the world, and the door meaning, you know, Christ is the door, I am the door. So you just want to step across that in a very sacred way, you know.
When John was a professor in Canada in the 60s, he began to seriously question everything about his life. To test himself and his beliefs, he turned his back on everything that anchored him, his faith, his education, his job, even his friends, to live in isolation in the wilds of Connemara.
I always had this whole thing from the day I woke up around 17 and a half. I always had this thing, don't fence me in. Don't fence me into an institution, don't fence me into society, don't fence me into a job. Just, I wasn't able for that, you know, and I never asked it of myself. I was beginning to be dissatisfied with teaching anyway, because I was teaching people to be successful. In some sense, I was teaching people to be successful in a world that I didn't believe in. You know, to go out and eventually they would go off and maybe be solicitors in the world, teachers in the world, or whatever in the world, you know. So there was a real need there in me to jump ship, you know, not to give my energy to a world I didn't believe in, and not to teach people to give their energy to the world that I didn't believe in. But positively, I wanted to come away and find my bush soul. Who am I in the bush? Who am I outside of human community? Who am I in the wilderness, away from sight even of the smoke from the campfire, I felt like a potted plant, a plant in a pot. And when the roots of the plant hit the plastic or hit the surrounding ceramic, they have to know where to go, but round and round and round, and then go back into the old sour soil. And that's what I was like. I was like a potted plant. And I felt I needed to lift myself out of that pot and plant myself in wild soil again.
John delved deeply into the world of meditation and reflection. It was a difficult and tortured road to take.
I underwent a shattering, a complete shattering under the mountain one day, and I came home and I was a ruin. I was ruined. Now, Jesse, come on, Jesse. And it was the European mystics were talking to me now, and because I had John of the Cross, and I started reading him for the first time. This man is making sense to me. Teresa of Avila is making sense to me. Eckhart and Tauler and Susan, all the Rhineland mystics are making sense to me. And I have been intellectually very alone. And someone has said that solitude is the glory of being alone. Loneliness is the pain of being alone. I've experienced both the glory of being alone and the pain of being alone. And the pain of being alone is mostly to do with not being able to share your ideas with other people,
Then, a woman called Eileen came into his life.
I met Eileen in Connemara, and one day I was walking up a corridor and she walked past, and I don't know why, but I said, that's her. And the difference now was that I'd met girls in Dublin and places like that, and you couldn't say you're as lovely as a GPO, I'll compare you to Cleary's department store, To be in love in Connemara was a wonder, because we could walk by the lovely sensuous Owenmore River, we climbed the Rada Hill, and everything, Heather, everything was a metaphor for your love for her, and it was a wonderful place to be in love, Connemara, and I grew from being in love with her to loving her. And she asked me, what did that mean one day? And I said, well, for the first couple of years, I was in love with you. Now I love you. And that means that I can get up some morning and be fed up with you, and not like you maybe, but I still love you, It's independent of my feelings now and the flux of feelings, And that was a wonderful place to have arrived at.
Was she and your love for her compatible with your journey for self-exploration? I mean, was there a problem there?
There was, yeah. And she told me once that she felt that we might be secondary to each other, because of this, And I said, that to be is to be toward. To be toward that, to be toward you, to be toward, to be is to be toward mountains and hills and stars, And my primary being toward is being toward divine ground, And if I'm right in being toward divine ground, then I'm able to be towards mountains and stars and people in a more healthy way, in a richer way, in a less cranky way, do you know what I mean? Certainly in a richer way. And what I said to Eileen was yes, my primary being toward is being toward divine ground. My second being toward is being toward you. But that does not mean that you would ever be secondary. Well, my sister said, when it broke up, and I was broken-hearted, and Madeline, my sister, and Brenda were talking to me one day about it, and said, Jesus, they said, the wonder is not that she left, the wonder is that she stayed with you for so long. So there were kinds of growing that had to take place in me that couldn't take place inside of marriage. I mean, it was the old thing, don't fence me in. But I did ask her to marry me, but it was too late,
Today, John is driven by his dream for this monastic hedge school. Though surrounded by Christian ruins, and with monasteries and convents closing down today, He still believes that Christianity can reclaim its soul, that Jesus has a place in the world.
That's who and what Jesus is as I see him. He is the one who rises out of ruination. He rose out of the ruination of Good Friday after all. And if he can rise out of the ruination of Good Friday, he can certainly rise out of this ruin. And this is, after all, a Franciscan monastery, isn't it? And Francis started by rebuilding a church, by building the wall and re-roofing a ruined church. And come on, I will show you something here, like what I mean by this. There it is. There's the great tree of life, the great tree, if you like, of Christian life, grown right there in the middle of the ruin. And I look at it and I know that the future is with life, not with death. That's a memorial plaque to four great Kerry poets, among them Eoin O'Sullivan, a great head school master as well as a great poet. Now we're in Sliabh in East Kerry, in Ashling land. Ashling is one of the great Irish words. It means a dream vision. And after the Vatican sale in 1607, when the native chieftains went away to foreign parts, and then after the depredations of Cromwell, people without a vision. And it says in the Bible, a people that have no vision, without a vision the people perish. But poets grew up here, arrived here, or were born here in Sliabh and Kerry, in Ashling land, and they again dreamed a dream of Ireland. Basically, of course, it was a kind of restoration of Gaelic Ireland they were dreaming of. But the point is, like, without vision, people perish. These people had the vision. And Eoin O'Sullivan was one of the great poets of the 18th century. And I now will walk towards his great door. And when I'm walking to Eoin Ro's door, I'm walking to one of the great doors of the 18th century. And Eoin Ro was a poet, but he wasn't only a poet, he was a head school master. And he was a poet almost in the sense of the old shaman of old. Like, there was a bit of spell in him, there was a bit of magic in him. So to stand in Eoin Ro's door is like standing in that Romanesque door yesterday, the greatest door in the 18th century. And I suppose they would have said, Balo ye and such dark. Blessing from God, go in before me into this great, great house. And I'm going to go in across this great threshold, and I'm going to go up and I'm going to sit right there at his hearth, at his fireplace. This is the backstone to Eoin O'Rahil's, to Eoin O'Sullivan's fireplace. And I'm going to sit down here beside Eoin's fireplace. And here all the stories would be told. And here, this man had a head school a couple of fields up here, where he was one of the great head school masters of his time. And 'tis said that people came in the 18th century to Dingle when Dingle was a totally, Dingle town, which was a totally Irish-speaking town. English came in and they didn't have any Irish, and the local people didn't have any English. But they could talk to the kids in the street who spoke Latin and Greek. And that's what they learned in the head schools. So this isn't only Eoin O'Sullivan's house. I mean, just the name itself, just the word Eoin O'Sullivan, the wild man, the seerie, and the poet whose poems were being sung while he was still alive, you know. And the idea of the head school in hidden Ireland. So I'm sitting at, for me, what is one of the great fireplaces in Ireland, not just in the 19th century, in the 18th century, in the 19th century today. I'm sitting at one of the great fireplaces in the world. I wake usually around 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'll fall to thinking, and if I'm writing, if I'm doing any bit of writing, like, I'll think about where I am in the piece of writing, and I'll work on that in my head for about 3 hours, and then I'll come down and I'll put on a bit of porridge and I'll start writing, and after about an hour I'll have the porridge, and then I'll write till about 4 o'clock, and then I'll go out for a walk, and I'll come back, and maybe I'll go up to Broston's, my neighbours, for half an hour, like maybe if there's no football match or something, I'll watch a bit of that, like, and then come back down and start the whole thing all over again, like go to bed and start the whole thing all over again, you know. And when I was writing Nostos, I did that for, I woke at 5 o'clock every morning, and I did that every day for 7 days a week, Christmas Day and Easter Day, like for a year and 3/4, non-stop, like just a total push, you know.
And how do you survive financially?
I go around and give talks, like, and I don't charge for the talks. And I say to people, the two things that don't count are money and numbers of people. I'm happy to go for nothing, or for my expenses, or for some few extra bob. Or, you know, I'm happy to talk to 2 people as well as 20 people, as well as to 200 people, you know. So money and numbers aren't the two things that count, but I always get a few bob, like. And I live on that then, you know. I mean, I did a thing called the Blackbird and the Bell, and I got 3,000 for that. Lord save us, wasn't that £500 a day above, and, or what was it? Yeah, £500 a day, like whatever it was. I got 3,000 anyway. You know, and I lived on that £3,000 for 3 years, £1,000 a year. That did me. I didn't have to, and because that was it. I lived on that for three years, you know. I have everything I want. Like, I mean, I quit in Canada, and I haven't spent a night since without a roof over my head or food on my table. And if I haven't food tonight, like, because I haven't gone downtown, you know, I'll go straight up to Broston's, like, and I'll go in, and even if they're in bed, I'll open their cupboard and I'll bring down bread and milk and whatever is up there, you know. You there, Maisie? You there? How are you, Maisie? How are you? Come on, God bless you.
They're very important to you, then.
Yeah, wonderful people to me, you know. But it isn't so much that they're wonderful people to me, they're wonderful in who they are, you know, the way you can be in their house, you know. There are a lot of houses and you feel you have to sign a form before you go in. I mean, you walk into Broston's house, like, and whatever's going on when you walk in, they're not going to stop it because you walked in, you know. They're going to be themselves, and it's great, like, and you can talk with them, laugh with them and fight with them, and it's great. You can... There's a whole range of your humanity to which they are hospitable, and that's a wonder.
But I suppose if you spend the day sitting here, up here, it's nice to get out of the
It's great. You need. I mean, sometimes it's almost like saying, "Just babysit me now for an hour," like, babysit my head now for an hour. You know what I mean? You know. Yeah.
John surrounds himself with his own very particular collection of books. But what do they mean to him?
First and foremost, like, they're books that explain me to me. I mean, they give me a language. I mean, that helps me. It's almost a mirror. I can look on these books, or these books will be a mirror to me, and I can say, yeah, I recognise me to me. And it's great, like, when you feel that a Teresa of Avila understands where you're at. If you're beyond a place where no one understands, then you're in real trouble. But it's when you recognise that maybe, you know, other people have been there. There are other people who know this territory, who know this countryside, and this countryside is not unexplored. Then that's wonderful, you know.
I'd hesitate to say, but I gather you wouldn't find a novel or a work of fiction among any of those books on that floor.
Yeah, I mean, who we are sociologically. The novel, like, tends to be about property, people with owning houses, and there's relationships, and there's complications in the property and complications in relationships, and there's a whole tussles going on. In the end, you know, it's unravelled, or maybe it isn't unravelled, you know. Who I am sociologically doesn't really interest me anymore. Who I am in society, my role in society, which is typically what the bourgeois novel is about. I mean, I have said that the novel is just superior gossip, and I didn't get any claps on the back for saying that. But, I mean, who am I in the Hazelwood? Who am I outside of society? I mean, when I quit in Canada, I wanted to go and seek my bush soul. And by who am I out in the bush? Who am I, like, beyond the pale of human society, where I can't even see the smoke from the campfire, you know? I'm out with the animals now. I'm out with the woods and trees and the lakes and whatever, you know? Who am I out there? I mean, people must get wonderfully and strangely tired of being always inside of society, mustn't they, you know? I mean, I'm amazed at the docility of people, you know, because if I borrow 200,000 in the old days, like, I would have borrowed a nice 70,000, say, pounds in the old days for a house, like, you know, I have to pay back twice and a half, 2.5 times that. You know, borrow 100,000 and I have to pay back 250,000. Now, if someone comes up to me in the street, like with a knife, and says, "Your money," like, I'm mugged, fine, I give him my money. But that's the little fella, the druggie or whoever he is. But then we have the pinstriped muggers, the people who are chauffeur-driven in cars in the financial houses, and they're mugging me. I mean, to the tune of 150,000, over and above what I borrowed. Now, that isn't just the sweat off my brow, that's the blood off my brow. So I can't understand why the mortgagees of Ireland don't arrive some night in O'Connell Street, don't sit down and light candles and sing hymns, and when we go down to them and ask them, or when someone comes down and asks them, "What's up, gang?" like, they say, "We'll give you 5% over and above what we borrowed, but no more," you know, enough to keep paint on the buildings or whatever it is, or to keep them heated or whatever, you know. You know, it's the docility of people to be mugged to that extent and to cooperate with the mugging, you know.
Perhaps there's never been a greater need for a hedge school. Like the rose and the hedge, it could be an oasis in the modern world, a quiet turning of the sod in Christian faith. John has ideas on how it should be structured.
A central oratory. In the 4 directions, you have a lecture room, library. Over there you have a dining room, kitchen. Then you have a reception area and, I suppose, a place where you'd have the power plant or whatever. And then in the 4 intermediate points, there are 4 cells each, so you have 16 cells. So it is centred on an oratory. The dream is that it would be centred on an oratory. And so prayer life is at the centre of it, and the monastic day is at the centre of it. Before I go to bed, I make the sign of the cross of myself, in the name of God, the Almighty Father, from whom in Tolm I turned away, setting myself up as a self-sufficient individual, in the name of Jesus Christ, the Son, who turning toward me has redeemed me, and in the name of the Holy Spirit, who sanctifies me. And I go to bed with that, like, you know. I'm for, I suppose, acknowledging God, and for prayer, I'm for standing beautifully on the earth. To live towards God, and to live consequently then, in consequence of that, toward the earth in a new way, and towards other people in a new way. That's what I'd be for.